Light as a feather, stiff as a board. Light as a feather, stiff as a board.
We are the weirdos, mister.
Black as night, erase death from our sight. White as light, mighty hectate make it right.
I myself am strange and unusual.
Cast a circle, spark some incense, and grab a cup of tea because it's time for the Cousins Coven podcast. I'm Sharon.
And this is Wendy. Welcome back to the Coven, you guys.
Yay, welcome back. Hope you guys are all enjoying the holiday season, the winter season. I know we're excited for today's episode.
We are too. When does this air? I didn't even think about that. I should have looked to see because what about Yule? Yule's coming up.
I think Yule's going to be next week.
Actually, Yule's on the 23rd. This airs the 18th, so...
We're in that smack dab of the winter.
Yeah. Gotta love Yule. Do you have anything going on this year that you're going to do?
Well, as you guys should remember from last year, the veil between the worlds is also thin during Christmas.
Yeah.
And so I really want to do some ghost hunting with you.
Yes, we can do that. Absolutely.
I guess I shouldn't even say hunting, more like communication.
Yeah. Communication, yeah. That whole hunting thing, I've really changed my mindset since we've really been doing it more and more.
Right.
But I just think it's right. We're just communicating back and forth. And
we're not here to trap anything, kill anything. We're just here to talk.
And maybe help.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really what I want to do. So if there's anyone who's really into going to haunted places, seeing ghosts, I highly recommend utilizing this time.
Yeah.
Of the veil being thin, or maybe just communing with ancestors as always. That's a good one.
Absolutely. Leaving some Yule treats.
Yeah.
My daughter said she's going to make a Yule log for me this year.
Awesome.
Like a cake.
Okay.
I'm really excited because I've always wanted to make one, and she...
That'll be nice with all the love put into it.
Yeah.
I wonder what kind of recipe she's going to use.
I don't know. We were looking at different ones.
Mm-hmm.
She just learned how to make cinnamon rolls at Thanksgiving. So she made a second batch and they were so good.
It's always
so
nice
good.
when you live with someone who's willing to bake.
Yeah, it just does wonders on my butt. But
wonders on your butt?
Like it's just getting bigger and bigger to just keep eating and eating.
Big butts are in fashion now.
That's right. So it's good.
It's good. It is very good.
Yeah.
So I think you had a fun experience this week you were going to share.
Yeah. So this week I was sitting at home getting ready for work. And sometimes when I'm getting ready for work, I just kind of veg out and watch a little TV in the morning and just...
Slowly wake up.
Yeah, slowly wake up. So I was sitting on the couch with my dog and nobody else was in the house. Everybody else had gone about their day already. Because I'm lucky I don't work until later in the day. So I was just sitting, chilling. And then I heard Agatha, our little dog, go off. And she was talking about, she just said something like, want to come and play or something like that. Whatever she says.
A little automated sound.
Yeah,
so again, she doesn't talk.
No.
She has a noise box.
Yeah, she has a noise box.
But it went off by itself.
It went off by itself. And I was like, what was that? And my dog, she just barked once. She jumped off the couch and then she ran upstairs. And I was like, why would she do that? Like, does this happen all the time? So she ran upstairs and then I could hear her sitting at the top. Like, I didn't move from the couch. I was just sitting listening, like wondering what else I could hear. And I could hear her sitting kind of at the top of the stairs, just sitting there. And then in the upstairs bathroom, I could hear what sounded like a little ball bouncing up and down. And I was like, what was that? And then she ran down and sat up on the couch with me, and I heard it again. So it couldn't have been her because she was with me.
Right.
And then I could hear nobody else was upstairs, and then I could hear somebody walking around.
Wow. So
and
she followed the ghost.
She did, and I yelled up there, and I was like, hello, hello, no response, and then it got really quiet. So I was like, what was that? And I went in and I looked at the doll, and she did look like she had been touched. She was kind of propped differently.
So this is the first time, well, not maybe the first time, but one of the first times
Yeah.
that Agatha's been moved by a spirit, potentially.
Yes.
It sounds like a kid, so maybe they
Potentially, yeah.
bopped her, ran upstairs, and then started playing with a ball.
Maybe, but I don't know where she would have got the ball. It's not like we have little toys around our house anymore. My kids are adults, so...
Do you think it's just that, like, because if we can hear spirits walking necessarily, is it just like a noise?
It
Ghost
could have been
almost?
a residual...
Right, like the ghost used to play with a ball so we could hear the same noises
Sure.
the ghost used to make.
Maybe. Maybe they don't even... I mean, obviously they had to have seen the doll to touch it. So I don't want to say it's a residual person, but maybe the ball
Is it an intelligent haunting then, if it is interacting with the doll?
I would think so.
Right.
Otherwise, they're depending on how you view space and time. So if we view all time at once, maybe somehow this doll is imbued enough to be in their reality and our reality. That's so hard to grasp.
Dolls have been around for so long, so everyone knows they can play with a doll.
Right, except for this one's got no eyes, so wouldn't you think it'd be a little creepy?
Yeah, she's got like whited out eyes and blood dripping down pretty much.
Yeah, she does look a little creepy.
She does. She's not the most inviting.
No.
But she went off by herself, and you heard noises.
And I heard noises.
So that's for sure a ghost.
Yeah.
So a ghost has touched Agatha!
Yeah. So I don't know. I haven't had any other experiences. I mean, I sat there for a little bit, but then I seriously was wondering if it happens. If my dog ran upstairs.
Oh, like she's used to this routine.
Yeah, maybe it happened.
I see what you're saying. Well, I know you've told me, I believe on podcast, if it's okay to say, that you've heard footsteps before.
Oh, yeah.
So maybe the dog is sensitive to it.
Yeah, maybe. Just interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's got a routine.
Yeah.
So you think she tries to chase the entity like it's fun? Because she doesn't act scared.
No, she didn't act scared. I don't know. It's hard to say. Or maybe they just coexist and she just thinks it's another person. We had been at home. All of us had been at home off for a holiday for like seriously like 5 or 6 days in a row. And the day that I went back to work, my dog was actually excited. And I was like, what? Even you're sick of me from being home?
Wow.
But I don't think it was that. I think she just wanted her time alone. And maybe that's her time when she gets to see and hang out with other
Ghosties?
ghosts or spirits or something. I don't know. I'm just hypothesizing, but...
That's a cute idea.
Yeah.
We should make a children's book about like a dog who plays
the ghost and the dog.
Yeah,
I love it.
So cute.
It's sweet.
That's a really cute little idea. Just they're partying upstairs and playing.
Yeah, they're just hanging out. They're like, it's so quiet now that those humans are gone.
Yeah, we can finally party. You would have an intuitive dog.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, coexisting.
I like it. I think that's a really cute. Cute.
Love. All right. We have a really big topic today, you guys.
We do.
Yeah. So,
Dive in.
yeah, we'll dive in. So today we're talking about ancient Egyptian magic. And it is believed that Old World Egyptian magic is the precursor to almost all Western magic and occult practices of today.
So let's dive deep into the waters of the Nile and examine the religious and magical beliefs of ancient Egypt. And we're going to be covering major gods and goddesses, cat magic, and the Book of the Dead.
Yep.
So this is a topic I think we've wanted to cover for a while.
Absolutely.
There's just so much to cover.
Yeah.
So we're going to try to share all of our research, and I just am excited. So,
yeah, hopefully we do it some justice.
I know.
I'm a little bit nervous, I have to say, talking about such a big subject that I love so much. So hopefully.
We want to do it right.
Yeah.
It's basically how we feel, yeah. So I want to start off by just kind of covering, I guess, a general belief in magic that everyone had in ancient Egypt and the religion, because it was tied together. and magic and all occult like activities were really mainstream and common, which I find to be amazing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you weren't thought of an outcast or evil by practicing magic. Everybody did this.
That's so awesome.
So from royalty to the average person, spells were going on every day. It was an essential part of daily life and your religion. People were praying to gods. You know, magic was even aimed at controlling the gods and working with the gods.
Interesting.
Yeah. So just like today, how witches use spells, they were using spells for everyday things like health, love, working with ghosts, trying to block evil spirits, and even trying to help themselves in the afterlife. They believed that they could control not only their everyday life with magic, but they could also control the afterlife. So I don't know if Egyptians were like me and just control freaks.
Right.
But everyone's using magic.
I heard they could even control with like salves and stuff, snakes and rats.
And rats?
Yeah, and potentially cats.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So, do they think of that as like a spirit communication? Not communication, but like possession? Or...
I don't know. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't dive too deep into it. I was just like, wait, what?
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
And as far as like ingredients, you know, this is a long time ago that we're talking about. So people were just using the kind of tools that they had naturally available to them by the land. So like herbs, scarab beetles, milk, apple seeds, and then of course just like the organic substance from humans themselves that you can use in magic. So like hair, fingernail clippings, urine, you know, all the things.
Probably blood.
Probably blood.
Yeah.
Probably blood. There was a big emphasis on amulets, and I know that with all of the famous imagery and hieroglyphics, you see a lot of really cool fashion.
Right.
Big amulets and headdresses. Like a lot of the time that stuff is inscribed with actual spells for protection. People who are buried, you'll see a lot of like hieroglyphics that are protecting them in the afterlife.
Right.
So I really like that they're empowering their objects.
I even read something recently that they're finding when they're doing imagery, like, you know, CAT scans or something. They're doing CAT scans of mummies, and they're finding that on the bones, the hieroglyphs are in the bones. So they've been tattooed on them.
Or carved? Or
Carved or
like
tattooed, I'm not sure.
Okay.
Could you imagine that? How would they do that when you're alive? I wonder if it happens after death or...
Probably during the mummification process, because they're taking things out, putting different organs in jars, I know. Like, that was a topic I wanted to have more time to dive into, but I didn't get too deep in.
Sure.
But it sounds like they're opening things up, closing them back, so maybe they were actually taking out the bones and carving on them?
Wow.
Along with the tattoos, like you're saying?
Maybe that'd be real intense.
Yeah. I kind of am not, like, the idea of doing that kind of sounds cool to me. Like, I would never want to be a mortician.
Right.
I'm quite squeamish, but there's just, maybe I'm glamorizing it because, like, the Mummy movie and stuff as a kid, I loved it. But it just sounds so cool to be a part of that spiritual process of prepping someone for the afterlife.
Yeah. Interesting.
So spiritual. So, yeah, they work with also magical potions and a lot of, like, wax effigies. So, kind of like what we would think of as a voodoo doll or a puppet. They're using a lot of little wax humanoid figures to represent themselves or another person
or the
to
gods.
use in their spell. Yeah, or to represent a god.
Cool.
Definitely. And their spiritual beliefs is kind of that that the earth has a close relation to the underworld, the sky, and the air. So that kind of makes me think of that old school saying, "As above, so below."
Right.
And they also believe that there's countless seen and unseen beings that are just always around us. And some of them are going to be really friendly. There's some that are inhospitable, but the Egyptians believed that they would work with them and command them and control them in their magic.
Gotcha.
And whether they wanted to be controlled or not. So the Egyptians just used these spiritual beings and worked with them.
And coexisted.
Yeah. No, it didn't sound like there was too much fear, although they did believe that there were bad ones, of course, but they just kind of used protection. So they're empowering themselves, you know? I like that. Let's see what else we got. Oh, one thing that I did find about religious and magical beliefs is that the magic had to be kind of precise. So there would be priests who would learn these spells or hand movements and gestures, and it was really like systematically, kind of had to be the same every single time. So if you did the one spell the same time of day, said it the same way, even down to like the way the tone of your voice is. You would have to control the tone of your voice. I thought that was kind of sounded cool. That would make the spell more powerful. And they would work with kind of complex systems of magic like alchemy, astrology, astronomy, and herbal medicines. And then they would make stuff out of like animals, I guess, like little animal potions and things like that. So a lot of complex systems here.
Wow. It reminds me a lot of Enochian magic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that is very precise. Definitely. So you kind of would, a practitioner could become like an expert in one of those fields. And they were considered to be highly important in society. So it's kind of, I guess one word I found that you could call this type of magic is Egyptian pharaonic witchcraft. And a lot of men were priests back in the day, and they would work with their spirits, whether they were good or bad, to just kind of, help them in their little spells. And so these men that were priests, they would do these holy rituals. They would be considered like an Egyptian magician, a sorcerer, or a magician under another name could be like a god worker. So I thought that kind of made sense, like to think of us as God workers,
right?
If you're working with a divine.
Did you find anything that said that men and women were equal in that respect, or do you think it was just men?
A lot of the stuff was focusing on men priests, which surprised me. But I did hear that women were also priestesses in the home, so maybe they were more doing the magic at home. But I didn't get a clear picture on what the women were doing.
Gotcha.
So that's something I could learn more on. I heard so much about these men priests. A lot of them that were doing this, they would be like in this magical headspace for like 3 months out of the year at a time, and it would be a hereditary duty that was passed down to you. And so you would kind of like take shifts, and when you're on your little shift, you have to have like, I guess, spiritual cleanliness, be really clean, don't eat meat, no fornication. And that's kind of stuff I've heard a lot of like Wiccan people say, or the Golden Dawn, and I know they all borrowed a lot of stuff from Egypt. Right. So it really does trickle down to us today, the thought of being like, take a bath before a ritual, be pure, be clean, that kind of thing. And this is just a side note, I did find out that like Egypt was the first society to have bathrooms. Oh. Indoor bathrooms. Nice. So they made indoor toilets and a room just for grooming with mirrors.
So how did we go backwards? Like we were pooping in outhouses for a while.
Right? How did it all crumble?
Yeah. Where did we lose that indoor plumbing?
The Egypts were just badass architects.
I guess so.
If you believe that they did make all the pyramids, and everything like that, they made all that stuff and put a ton of work into it. But I think that's cool because they're highly spiritual. Right. And they're working on their cleanliness, their fashion. Like, it's just a really cool society.
Very cool.
Yeah. Another thing that makes their society a little interesting is that some scholars will theorize that most Egyptians were just high a lot. They were definitely drunk a lot because the water wasn't that safe, so beer was safer to drink. Right. The beer was like, I guess, kind of a sweet beer, more like champagne, so that sounds lovely. Yeah. So there was a lot of that going on. Plus, the priests would chew on a blue lotus plant, and it had psychedelic properties. So a lot of these priests, when they're getting ready to do their magic, they're going to chew on this lotus, and this kind of opens them up to channels for divination. Nice. So, of course, I'm down with that. I'm like, ooh, that sounds awesome.
Blue lotus, DMT, all the same.
Add it to the list, yeah. Yeah. And so they'd get into their ritual headspace, and there was this belief that the act of speaking a ritual formula was the act of creation. So I think that's beautiful because just by opening our mouths, we're creating something. Right. Whether it be a song, a spell, whatever. I have a note here. It says there was they would use spells to rid the ghosts from residing in the body. So I guess...
Oh, so they weren't possessed, so that they couldn't become possessed.
Yeah, so there was a lot of worry about like spirit possession. So they believed in
possession.
Right.
So maybe possessions are real. I mean, I feel like I know I've had experience with this kind of stuff, but
it's just one of those things that's hard to grapple. Yeah. Yeah. And I almost, like, by admitting possession is real, it's kind of scary. Is that opening us up to like some spirit?
Right. I'm like
no. So they did definitely believe in ghosts. They had the ability to come in the body. They would do spells to get them out. A lot of conversations. They would converse with dead souls to kind of empower themselves and talk to those souls. And it would help them kind of cleanse themselves of any guilt or sins. I thought that was kind of interesting. Another tool that they did have, which witches still use today, is they would use ivory knives. So like a white handled knife, which I know today we call, I think, like a bowline. They would use those to actually cast circles of protection around beds. And so I love that they were casting circles with their little knives. And that was to keep all the evil spirits from going into their body while they slept at night. So protection was a big deal before you going to bed. And invoking gods was also a huge step in their magic. They would also believe that non-living things, even images, all had powers. There was something, everything was living and breathing and had souls in a sense.
They're not wrong.
Right?
I mean, even science says that now.
Right? Yeah, and so they could really work with anything. They were open to working with it all. And the old Egyptians believed not only in one God who was like an eternal, omnipresent, like creator. There's also these other like lesser gods that they work with, and all these other beings that they work with. And so there's just so much about the gods I know we wanted to cover. Yeah.
Yes. So I do have a little bit to talk about the gods. So first I wanted to talk about Heka. We were talking about whether, I know off podcast we were kind of talking about whether Heka was a god. I came to find that really it's just a word that they used for magic.
Okay.
So the minor gods would use their magic, which they called Heka, and they would use it to help cure people. And Heka was really just this force which was behind the magic. So it's not, I guess, not the magic itself, but the...
Is it like divine energy?
Yeah, kind of like a divine energy, and also the... You know how we're always talking about your intentions? So Heka would be like the intention of the magic.
Okay.
And which is also divine energy.
Right. And so that's just kind of letting it do its thing, get that power, manifest.
Right. I also found something really interesting, that the Egyptians believed that you could obtain Heka yourself by consuming the gods. So they would sometimes eat other people after they had died.
Really?
To consume their powers.
I mean, that is something I've heard before, is that by eating another human, you will have either superhuman strength, you know?
Right.
That's
so very
lore.
strange.
That's lore I've heard from Native American lore.
I didn't think that was real. I just thought it was just fake, but since now we're finding it in more than one place.
Yeah.
I thought it was just something that we saw in cartoons or movies.
Something just to make it extra spooky.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I mean, they were open to doing a lot of different type of things that by today's standards we consider like horrifying.
Right.
Whew,
right.
I'd be too afraid to harness the power of cannibalism.
I know, right? Okay, so I kind of want to talk about not just the gods, but kind of the behind the scenes of the gods.
Okay.
Is that cool?
Of course. What do you
So
got?
initially the lore is that the first god was Ra, whom they also called Adam sometimes, spelled Atum, which is kind of crazy because we know about the Christian god Adam.
Right.
And so Ra was, I'm going to kind of talk about how Ra was supposedly made. So their story is that Ra was a part of the blackness. I got to figure out what they called that really quick. Primordial ooze. So Ra was a part of the primordial ooze of the universe, which they called the Sky Waters, or Nun, Nun. So the story is that Ra was in the Sky Waters, and he had two friends with him, and those friends died in a battle. And so he created the earth so that he could create people, so that he could have other people to live with that had his ideals.
That's cool.
So he came from the Sky Waters.
I like
so
that.
What does that make you think of?
Sky Waters?
Yeah. So if he came
know.
from the blackness of the universe, the sky.
I guess the universe?
Yeah.
The stars?
So he came from space.
Right? Okay.
So he came from space.
Sky Waters.
Yeah.
So they look at the sky and that's not how they can describe it. It's like water.
Right. And he said that he came from an area near the sun. And so that's why his name is Ra, because that's what they associated with the sun was Ra.
Is he a sun god?
He is a sun god.
Okay.
He is a creator of the world,
Okay.
of the earth, but also a sun god. So there is this group under him called the 9 gods of Heliopolis, which Heliopolis just means the city of the sun. So I don't know how many times I'm going to say Heliopolis. I'll probably just say city of the sun. They called themselves the Ennead. And there were 9 gods in this Ennead. And so it was Ra, Shu, which is the god of air, and his wife Tephanet, which is the goddess of moisture. And then there was Geb, the earth god, Nut, the sky goddess, Osiris and Isis. So they were all pairs. Notice how Ra is by himself, and then everybody else under him is
All
these
paired up.
couples. Yeah, and so then there was Osiris and Isis, Set and Nephthys. That's the form of who started the gods in Egypt.
Was that the main cluster?
The
I
main
guess?
cluster.
Interesting.
So I thought that was worth kind of setting up.
Yeah, when you said like goddess of moisture, that was just a new one to me. I'm like, what does that even entail?
Right,
Like the mist?
like mist, air, water
Okay.
combined.
Okay, so it's just kind of air and water combined.
Mm-hmm.
When you said moisture, I was just like, what does she do? Make like goddess moves?
Yeah, she's like, you shall be moist today for what is about to happen. So let's dive into Ra just a little bit more. So I already said that he was a sun god. Usually when he was depicted, he had the head of a falcon, which has a sun disk over his head. He was said to be the creator of life. And in human form, I said his name was Adam, kind of like Adam from Christianity. And he was created from that primordial ooze in the sky waters. And he went by several names, which we're finding every time I study a god. I find that it's always, it's this god and this god, but really they're the same.
Right.
So sometimes you'll hear Ra Atum together, and that's really the same person. And I found that his element is fire to represent the sun. And when calling on him in magic, you'll want to use stones and candles that represent that. And if you're using in a spell, you can use him and call upon him for rebirth and reinventing yourself, which I thought was really nice. So like if you're wanting to really restart your life over again, you would want to call upon Ra to get that creative juices flowing to
That
see
makes
how
sense,
you can.
because he created this whole thing, so he's a massive creator of change.
And they believed in Egypt that even after Ra had left this earth, that he would bless your day, so you would call upon him in the morning. So just as the sun rises, you would do rituals for Ra in the mornings to get your day started.
That's such a nice little habit to have your day start.
Yeah. In the Book of the Dead, it also said that if you wanted to send enemies away, you could call upon Ra
Nice.
and do a specific
He's got your
spells.
back.
Yeah, he's got your back. So he's like, you want to make this person go away? Let's do it. And so then the next god I wanted to talk about was Osiris. And he is the god of death, reincarnation, and the underworld. And his father was Geb, and his mother is Nut. Geb and Nut were brother and sister.
Oh.
So let's just, okay. And let's see what else. He was the brother and husband to Isis.
Isis is one I've heard of a lot, and I
Yes.
can't wait to learn more about.
Yeah. And he is also the father of Anubis, which you'll see Anubis in a lot of Egyptian lore with kind of this dog head. And I think I'm going to talk about him in a little bit too.
Perfect.
Osiris was always depicted with green skin.
Okay. I already know. I already know what you're saying. Alien.
He had this Egyptian beard and the wrappings of a mummy around him. Sometimes they'd have ostrich feathers and a crook, kind of like the Grim Reaper's sigh.
I like that.
And later he was kind of given a ram's head sometimes as a sign of his great powers. So interesting that he always had that, or that he had that green skin. I was like,
You know what that's making me think of? Because I've obviously got the Wiccan background. The Green Man is tied to the Horned God.
Right?
So all these little legends are kind of, like you said, co-mingle.
Commingling.
Yeah.
Yeah. And with him sometimes having the ram's head, he could be the horned god.
Horned god, right.
So in some theories, I was reading that they are one and the same.
Awesome.
So he could be your little
Osiris,
your origin of Pan or something.
Right, yeah. So he's just another name attached. Wow.
Right.
Good to know.
Yeah. And so with him, if you're going to use him in your spells, his element is earth. And so obviously use stones and candles that represent that, or you may want to bring in dirt. You might want to use some sort of feathers too to get the magic going. When I was reading, they were talking about using, just like when you're cleansing a house with feathers, sometimes you would use it in the smoke to get the magic going.
Awesome.
And then you can use him in spell work to request safe passage for those who have passed on. So maybe you've had a loved one that's passed on. You can call Osiris to help your loved one to the other side. You can also use him in past life work and for communicating with the dead.
I like this so much. It's really resonating with me. And of course, Egypt, I mean, they're not like, oh, he's evil. Like here, it's like Hades is kind of evil.
Right.
Or you have like, I guess the devil's kind of evil. Like they're these underworld positions. But he has this really important duty, which I would think is a sacred duty to be watching over death and the underworld.
Right.
So it's cool that he's kind of held in the high regard, not thought of as like evil.
Yeah. None of these I felt had any evil connotation with them, which was really nice, kind of refreshing almost to find that they were all respected in their own rights.
That's good.
And so the next one I wanted to talk about was Anubis. And Anubis actually means young dog. And the original name was Anpu, which I thought that was funny. I was like, dog, poo, what's going on here?
That's on brand.
Yeah. His father, as I said earlier, was Osiris. His mother was Nephthys. Those two were brother and sister. Did I already say that? He is often shown with a black dog head. And he is the god of fate, also a protector of the dead, a gatekeeper to the underworld. So he'd be a gatekeeper outside of where Osiris is.
Oh, cool.
And he's also known as the patron god of lost souls. So if you are lost on the earth, or if you know somebody who is lost on the earth, you could call Anubis, and Anubis could help usher them through the gate.
We could totally help.
I know.
Use that help.
Yeah.
When we're
So
doing
I was like, oh my gosh, now I'm calling on Anubis.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I was so psyched for that.
Yeah. So loving these gods. Kind of a fun fact that later on, priests who performed the embalming ceremonies would wear a black jackal mask to represent Anubis.
Ooh.
So we've seen that a lot, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So his element is earth also, so use those colors of earth. In spell work, you would want to use him for protecting those passing on. You can also use him for fertility, like a rebirth purposes. And helping spirits move on or ridding spirits from a space, like we were just kind of talking about. So
he would be super useful for house cleansing.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, very cool. So I'm like, I want to get a little Anubis charm.
Yeah. I think that would be really cool.
Yeah. And I had just a few goddesses that I wanted to mention. Isis. She is the goddess of Egyptian magic, also of love, healing, beauty, magic itself in general, and also magic of these things, along with fertility. Her father was Geb, her mother is Nut. She's the wife of Osiris, which was her brother. And her mother she's the mother of Horus. So I don't know if any of those names kind of sound familiar.
Out of all those, obviously the ones you already talked about, and then Horus.
Horus,
of course,
yeah.
the Eye of Horus.
Exactly.
So infamous.
She is known for resurrecting Osiris from the dead. So apparently Osiris died at some point, and she resurrected him with a salve that she rubbed all over his body.
So she's definitely got that witch energy.
She's always depicted as beautiful, kind of wearing a long sheath dress, and sometimes shown with the head of a cow with big, beautiful wings.
Wow.
Yeah.
A cow head. I don't think I've ever seen a picture of that.
Yeah, so I saw just a couple of them.
Is it a black cow or a spotted cow?
I think it was black, yeah.
That makes more sense because like they always have like a solid color animal head.
Her element is going to be water, and so use stones and candles or even metal to represent that. It said she really enjoyed metals. So interesting that, so they thought maybe like a silver or maybe even a blue colored metal.
Awesome. I don't feel like I have that unless
I
I've got
know,
coins, maybe
right?
jewelry.
Yeah, and so spells, you could use her to do goal manifestation, fertility, love spells, and spiritual growth. I just really love Isis so much. Like, there's just something motherly about her, and the fact that she's so badass that she loved her husband brother so much that she was like willing to bring him back from the dead.
Yeah.
That really just resonated with me. So I was like,
definitely.
She's like got some powerful magic in those hands.
Yeah, her feminine touch of just, representing beauty and fertility, strength, protection, healing, like that is very motherly, and it's a comforting, I think, deity. It sounds like she's very sweet.
Right. So the next one I had was, I always get this name wrong. Is it Hathor, you think?
I always say Hathor, but I could be
Hathor.
saying it wrong.
See, I had emphasis on the Thor too, but when I said that to somebody the other day, they were like, no, I think it's Hathor. And I was like, Thor.
Right? I'm not an expert either, so I'm not too sure.
So the great thing about Hathor is that her father is Ra, and she was really considered to be his all-seeing high. So her father was the ultimate god, and also her husband. But from what I understand from the stories, that they didn't have children together or sexual relations. He married her to almost in a way to make sure that she was loyal to him.
I was going to say, is he cock blocking so she doesn't?
No, I think it was more that he wanted her to be on his side and really get down where all the people were to be his seeing eye.
So they just had a really close working relationship. Hopefully she was happy.
I think so. So she did have kids with someone, but she didn't have she didn't have any with her dad, which is good.
I would think.
She too is often depicted as a cow, and sometimes by the eye of Ra, since she was that kind of all-seeing eye. So that's when you'll see that is that really means Hathor.
Okay.
Yeah. I think I have a tattoo of that on my back.
You think?
No, I mean, I do, but it's like when I was looking at it, I didn't know if it was her
or the Eye of Horus.
Or the Eye of Ra.
Oh. I'm only familiar with the Eye of Horus.
Yeah. Oh, that's what I mean, the Eye of Horus.
Or is it the Eye of Ra? Now I'm all getting confused. There's so many gods.
Yeah, right? And so, she's the goddess of the sun, just like her dad was the god of the sun, she would consider the goddess. She's also the goddess of the sky, sexuality, motherhood. That's why sometimes she's portrayed as a cow. She's also the goddess of music and dance. So I think that she liked to have that fluidity and music in her life.
She knew how to have a good time.
Yeah. And when she was transformed into a goddess and not in her human form, she was known as Sekhmet, which is a lioness. So she was a lioness goddess. And so they do say that her element is water, and that her spells are best done around the full moon. So if you want to call on her, you could call on her for the growth of knowledge, for working on the nurturing side of yourself, for attraction, love spells, and finding your life's desires and passions. And also, like, if you wanted to see things clearly.
I could use all of those things.
Yeah, so she's just kind of a lot. I mean, there's a lot wrapped into her lore.
There is a lot of complexities because all these different shapes. She's attached to the moon and also the sun in a sense.
Yeah.
Very complicated woman.
Yeah, so she's a lot. But being that she would have been the first child of Ra, I mean, he created her without a wife. He wasn't ever married and he didn't have a wife. He just created this daughter. So
He definitely was very attached to his little first creation,
Right.
partner in crime.
Right. So kind of interesting. I was like, so would she have been considered like the Eve of it all? You know?
That's true. That's fair.
Yeah. And so then the last goddess that I have is Bast or Bastet. I wasn't really sure which one. She was known by both.
Okay.
Her father was also Ra, and she's usually represented by a cat or with a cat head. So you'll see in Egyptian hieroglyphs a woman with a cat head, and that's who they're referring to.
I've seen a lot of like cat statues, and I was wondering if that's Bast.
It could be, yeah. Later, she was also seen holding the Eye of Horus, which the Eye of Horus and the Eye of Ra are drawn almost exactly the same.
That's why I was getting confused, I think, because I was like, wait, which one is it? So there's one for each.
Yeah, but they're drawn almost exactly the same. I think the only difference is there's this little kind of underneath the eye. There's this swoop line. And
it's almost like
at the
eyeliner.
At the end, the dot is just a slightly different.
Oh, wow.
So I was like, how would you know?
Right.
Are they all the same? So she's, they were thinking potentially that it would mean the feminine and the masculine.
I like
the
that.
difference, yeah. But she's good at providing protection from evil, illnesses, and a destroyer of dead bodies. So she was known as a cremator almost. And I'm all, just as she takes breath from a cat from babies, that lore of cats sitting on a
Is it a
baby. I think it's not real, but they're always talking about how.
I think it might be real.
You think that's real?
I've heard that
a cat can sit on a baby and take their breath.
Yes, because if you, like, a lot of people will let the cat, like, sleep next to a baby in a crib, and it has caused suffocation. Unless that is just one of those folklore tales that, like, like how people say, we swallow this many spiders.
Oh, right.
That's, like, all fake.
Gotcha.
I don't know.
Interesting. And so then she can also be associated with music and dance and perfumes that were said to stop illness. So apparently she would go from home to home with these different perfumes or potions that she had made and be able to stop the spread of the illness.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I was like, dang, she was a medicine woman for sure.
That's true.
Yeah. Her element is fire, so make sure to use those stones and candles that represent that or that of a cat. So like you might want to use tiger's eye or something. So spell work would be protection against evil, illness, and negativity. You could use her with fertility spells, which is very common, I feel like, for most women goddesses.
Right.
You can also use her for inner strength, to pull on her for some of that inner strength.
That's really cute. I am a little familiar with Bast. I love Pinterest for witchiness. Like,
yes.
My Pinterest feed is always just like little altars or spells or tips. And one of the great spells, there's my cat right now, that little bell, if you can hear that. One of the spells I found was for like cat protection.
Oh.
So whenever I like going away long term, I always pray to Bast. There's a spell I found for her to like watch over my cats.
I love it.
Yeah.
That's so cool. I love that a lot. So after looking at Bast, I kind of wanted to look a little bit at cat magic.
Yay!
So obviously cats were worshipped in the Egyptian culture.
Held in high regard.
Yeah, very. And they said that was because they can kill snakes. And they're also very nice. I was like, duh, cats are friendly. And also they were said to protect their humans. And so they said that cats would follow them from place to place. Like I read stories of Egyptians just walking down the street with their cat following them.
Wow.
Like
so
a dog
they
would.
Truly had little familiars.
Yeah. So they're filled with magic.
Yeah.
With familiars.
Right. And I thought there was a belief that like the cats had some sort of connection to the underworld or spirit world.
Yes, and so they would use them in the funerary process. So they would do like... when I read it, it seemed like the cats were dancing around the dead bodies.
Whoa.
So I was like, is that real? I think it must have been.
It could totally be like...
Yeah.
Not saying dancing, but maybe some cats did enjoy like running around
right.
or having a good time because
Or maybe they could see their spirits.
Yes. Because out of my 2 cats, that like I mentioned before, there's one who is down to clown with magic, and I feel like he sees spirits.
Right. Absolutely. I thought I've heard you talk about a circle.
Yeah.
And a cat like, ooh.
Yeah, like the cat, I felt like he was chasing like a spirit and or a bug, but I was like, is there spirits right now?
They said that cats can also be the embodiment of the gods. So like a god could take on cat form. Wow. So even if they weren't in our plane of existence, they were still in a plane of existence and could then come to Earth and take on cat form.
Interesting. That'd be really cute.
Which goes into ancient cat magic. You could shapeshift into a cat yourself and perform mischief. So there were these spells that they would perform where they'd rub this salve onto their bodies. Just like, remember how I talked about rubbing a salve on a broom and you could fly around? Well, these people would rub the salve on and then become a cat and go out and do mischief as a cat.
Wow. Okay. So this definitely explains why there's been this long-term connection to witches and cats and people fearing cats, because I've always heard that like in medieval times there was fear that women were transforming into these cats and causing problems. And that kind of makes me think of how like the Catholics basically got rid of all the cats, and what happened? They got the plague because they weren't having cats to kill the mice.
Right.
And it really backfired.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because they are useful animals.
They should have kept the cats. And so one of the other things that they said that they used to do was they would put kind of like how you have something around your cat's neck with a bell, they would put something around their neck, and then they would use the cats and talk to them. And the cats would either go do spy work for them or run errands. So they would be like, here, I need you to take this letter to so-and-so or do this. And
that's so cute.
Right? Could you imagine? I'm like, I need you to go get my laundry. Could you just go do that?
I would love for my pets to chip in around the house.
Right. You're just really slacking, dudes.
Yeah,
you're really slacking.
You have an easy life. You don't even know.
So today's witch can use cats in their magic. They use them to help protect the sacred space, so to usher out anything negative that might be in the space. So I love the fact that you have little cats in here.
Yay!
You can also learn from them because a cat is extremely independent. And so you are supposed to, there's a saying, I guess, that I read that was like, if you have a cat, then you're more independent than maybe someone else because you see from your cat's independence.
I have
that
a lot
you
to
too.
learn from my cats. I really do.
And apparently, just by having a cat in your home, it can enhance your psychic abilities.
Oh, so you can be a kitty hoarder and it will be okay.
It will be fine. Yeah. You can also use a black cat candle to remove a hex or to become invisible to certain people. So you would light that candle and then say that you don't want them to even notice you anymore.
I love that. I always wanted to buy the cat candles at like witch supply shops, but I was like, that's another $10 I don't want to spend.
Right.
But that is good to know purpose they're good for.
Yeah. And if you wanted to use a green cat candle, that would be for luck and fortune. Don't forget to remember to burn those all the way down to the end.
Okay, that's the one I want. I want a green cat.
And then a red one is for love spells and sex magic. And you can also use some of your black cat hair in a mojo bag to help with luck when you're out gambling.
I'm going to start collecting my cat's hair. That's not weird at all.
They said, but you don't want to take it from a brush. You want to take it from your hand. So it's just as you're petting, whatever hair comes off, you can save that in a little bag.
Okay, I'm
then
down.
when you get enough, you can use it.
Totally, it's going to
bring you
start
good
doing
luck.
that. That's so weird, but I'm going to do it.
You're like, never mind this bag that I've always got with me with black cat hair.
I mean, can I take it for my clothes? I swear to
Maybe.
God, there's so much cat hair all over my body.
I love it.
Well, I love all of that. Like, cats just make me happy. They are just so cute and sweet.
Yeah.
And they are so spiritual and smart. I love the idea of working with them. And I love that movie scene in Constantine where he is doing magic with the cat.
Yeah.
I think he looks in the eyes and is somehow transported to hell.
Right.
It's just the coolest notion to me.
Yeah. See. they can usher you in.
To the underworld.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what's up with you? I don't know too much about this, but I'm always seeing like how they would mummify cats. That even today we're unearthing all these little secret rooms that are full of like mummified cats.
Right. Those were protectors. So it was just a means of protection from what I could understand. So as you want to be protected in life, they also wanted you to be protected in death. And also those cats may go on with you to the other side. So who knows if they'll take the same form as a cat. They may also become a human form. Maybe you'll get to marry your cat someday.
Oh, I'm down.
We're in love.
My cats are perfect. It just makes me so happy. So thank you for sharing that research.
Yeah, of course.
I'm so happy. The last thing that I really was drawn to look into for today's episode was the Book of the Dead. I feel like I thought that was a fake thing because I was obsessed with the Mummy as a little girl, and I just thought that was a Hollywood invention.
Right.
And of course, in that movie, that book is used to like conjure locusts and the evil mummy. But it's honestly a real book, and it's full of all this magical secrets of ancient Egypt. So I guess they consider it like funerary text, since there's so much spirituality and magic going into the burial process and mummification. And it was used from the beginning of the New Kingdom, which is around 1550 BCE to around 50 BCE.
That's so long ago.
I can't even comprehend.
Yeah.
Like, I need a chart.
Right. Oh my gosh, that's that's so long ago.
I know! So this is ancient text. And it's comprised of all these magical spells to assist the dead person's journey through the Duat, I believe is how you would say it, which is considered the underworld, and it basically to go into a good place in their afterlife. And it was written by many, many priests over a period of 1,000 years.
Wow.
So a lot of contributors.
Plus people lived longer back then.
Like how long?
Like hundreds of years sometimes, I thought.
I didn't know that. That's
Yeah.
crazy. Oh my gosh.
Look at all these chemicals that we eat and live in today. Of course we don't live very long.
I'm shook. I thought they always say we live longer because of modern this and that.
No, they lived longer back then.
What? I didn't know that. I'm all shooketh right now. Wow.
I'm pretty sure. I mean, maybe...
I'm not that educated as far as, like,
I
all
feel
of
like-
life, so...
I feel like that I read that they lived...
I believe you. I just didn't know that.
And like the gods, they lived... You gotta think that the gods were in their god form, but then in their human form, they could live for hundreds and hundreds of years.
Maybe all this magic was paying off.
Maybe.
So, the Book of the Dead would be placed in a coffin, potentially, or in the burial chamber of the deceased, and it would be part of, like, the tradition of going through the whole burial process, and it includes these other books called the Pyramid Text and the Coffin Text.
Oh, yeah.
So I thought that sounded cool, Coffin Text.
Yeah, like, here's this book for when you're in your coffin and you're really bored.
Just like coffin jokes.
Yeah.
They would actually be written in like hieroglyphic form.
Of course.
Or I believe it's hieratic script, which is basically ancient Egyptian cursive, and they would put it on papyrus scrolls most of the time. But then there would be a number of spells that are considered a part of the Book of the Dead that aren't even on paper. They're on walls and tombs. They're all over the place, and they're completely separate. It could be like on a sarcophagus. So people have been uncovering different parts of the Book of the Dead throughout history. At present, we have about 192 spells that are known.
But who knows how many more they're going to find because they've been doing so much stuff in Egypt.
Right. Yeah, that's all. That's so it.
Cool.
Yeah, that's all that's just known. And they serve a lot of different purposes. So some could be like intended to give the deceased mystical knowledge in the afterlife, which of course, who doesn't want mystical knowledge? There could be incantations to basically ensure that different elements of the dead person's being were preserved and then reunited in the afterlife to give the deceased basically control over their world around them.
Nice.
So again, they love to have control in the afterlife and in their world. They also want to protect the deceased from various hostile forces. So the Egyptians believed that knowing the name of something gave power over it, which is something I've always heard, and that the Book of the Dead really will equip the owner with all of the mystical names of any of these evil entities that they could potentially encounter in the afterlife, giving them power over them.
Wow.
I didn't get any such names, but I was kind of curious. Like,
Yeah.
well, what's there?
Yeah. Wow.
So there's also the path to the afterlife that's basically laid out in the Book of the Dead, and it's believed to be a difficult one. So the deceased would be required to pass over a series of gates, caverns, and mounds that would be guarded by spiritual creatures. This is resonating with you?
Yeah, this is awesome.
And these terrifying entities were basically armed with enormous knives, and they'd be they'd be illustrated with grotesque forms, typically as human figures with heads of animals, and these creatures had to be basically pacified by reciting the appropriate spell, and that was in the Book of the Dead.
So that just reminds me of the gods with their animal heads. So maybe you had to pass the test of the gods.
Yeah, that does what I was thinking too. I was like, well, why are these ones grotesque? But I guess it's just maybe they're scarier depictions. Like some of these underworld beings I was reading had names like Blood Bather or Blood Drinker. Like they were just very violent.
Sure.
So I guess not
and
as
we're just really hypothesizing. I mean, honestly,
right,
all
a scholar
of this,
who's reading it, putting their image on it.
So we don't know what was really truly intended because we weren't there. I'd have to scry on that. be like, is this real?
Yeah.
What's the real interpretation?
How does it resonate with you? Yeah, I think that's valid. There would be a lot of spells too that are in there that you would want to put on amulets that would basically be worn by a mummy. Or sometimes they would actually put like little, like how you were saying they did it to the ribs, they'd put little symbols. They'd actually put stuff on the wrappings of the mummy.
I've heard that.
And even their headrests, they would have like little hieroglyphics just to protect them. And the mummification process itself, which I find super fascinating, basically served to preserve and transform the physical body into Sa, which is basically an idealized form with divine aspects. So it's kind of prepping the body to, I think, take on more godly-like aspects. And maybe either become one with the gods or potentially become a god.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. I find that fascinating.
And the Book of the Dead contains spells aimed at preserving the body of the deceased, which may have been recited during the process of mummification. So like you said, there is a lot of speculation. The heart, which was regarded as the aspect of being kind of like their soul and all their emotions and their intelligence and memory, it would be protected by spells. In case anything happened to the physical heart, sometimes they would even bury a jeweled heart scarabs with the body to provide a replacement. I don't know what would have happened to the heart.
Somebody ate it to get their powers.
Yeah, there was a lot of stuff I was reading about hearts and different rituals that might have been done with the heart. Like there was something they would do, like a judgment where they would put their heart on a scale against one of the gods' like feathers to see if it was equal weight, and if it wasn't, then they weren't worthy.
That reminds me of that story by Christian Rosenkreutz. The Chemical Wedding has something similar to that.
Oh, about like judgment
with scales, yeah.
Judging the scales. Yeah. I guess that's always been a kind of a symbol of judgment, are the scales. Then there's this Ka, or life force, you could call it, which would be kind of remained in the tomb with the dead body, and it would require sustenance from offerings. So you would want to give the Ka of the dead person basically food, water, or just burning incense. And so like your family members could come to your tomb and do this, or priests would come to your tomb and do this. And this was just to keep, I guess, your life force going. So
do you think the Ka is just consciousness? Is that what it sounded like to you?
I guess that, and just to kind of keep that spirit energy going. So I like the idea of that, because I remember just little things from different cultures, like in the Mulan movie, she's lighting incense in her little family altar every day. Like, that's kind of a nice thought.
Or Book of the Dead.
Yeah.
Or I mean, not Book of the Dead, but Day of the Dead kind of stuff.
Yeah, honoring the dead, giving them that sustenance so they can keep going. So I don't know how often it was required back in ancient Egypt, but there were spells in the Book of the Dead in case they forgot to give an offering and that so much time had lapsed and maybe their energy, their Ka was gone. Apparently spell 105 would ensure that the Ka was satisfied and could come back.
Nice.
So the Book of the Dead was really just full of tools to help with any kind of situation that might upset the soul or, hurt it in the afterlife. It's all about prepping for protection and getting through the afterlife. There's another aspect called the Ba, was a free-ranging spirit aspect of the deceased, and it was depicted as a human-headed bird, which could go forth by day from the tomb and into the actual world. And there was spells 61 and 89 that would act to preserve the Ba. And then there's something called, I guess you would say, the Shut, S-H-U-T, or shadow of the deceased, was preserved by spells 91, 92, and 188. And basically, if all of these different aspects of the person could be preserved, remembered, and satisfied and satiated, then the dead person would live on in the form of Ak. And Ak was a blessed spirit with magical powers who would dwell among the gods. So there's so many steps.
Oh my goodness. This is just mind-blowing because, first of all, the Shut, shadow people, that's what that reminds me of.
Ooh.
That's what shadow people are. Ak, like Akhenaten, was he somebody reincarnated?
Who is it?
Akhenaten, he was a ruler, an Egyptian ruler later on.
Yeah.
Maybe he was reincarnated from someone else.
Potentially they would believe in that, I think.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think that they think the soul could come back.
Totally want to look him up now.
Right? You're like, interesting. There's also this concept called the Field of Reeds, which was kind of like this divine, celestial, otherworld place that had a likeness to the real world Egypt of their time.
Okay.
So it was kind of like an idealized Egypt. So it was lush. There were all these plentiful fields and crops, oxen, people, and waterways. And it was like, I don't know, almost like a heaven version or Summerland version of Egypt. So your soul could go there if they didn't want to just go mingle with the gods. And when people talked about going there or legends of going there, you're going to see like your family and all of your deceased loved ones. So it very much sounds like, afterlife legends.
An afterlife.
Yeah.
So basically it was you could go live in the reeds or go live in the sky waters.
Yeah, go to space.
Or the underworld, which they believed was actually under the earth.
Right. Yeah. All these different planes of existence.
I'm going to the sky waters.
No, the plane, I would probably go to the fields.
Oh, okay.
Fields of Reeds probably where I'd want to go. So it was a pleasant place and very plentiful, but there was also this clear knowledge that manual labor would be required there.
Oh, man.
You had to keep things going. For this reason, burials included a number of statuettes named Shabti, basically that they would inscribe with a spell, and it would require them to undertake any manual labor that might be put on the owner that little Shabti would take.
Oh my gosh.
So they thought of everything.
It was like a tulpa or something, or what are those called?
A tulpa?
Not a tulpa, but there's these Jewish things, oh my god, why can I not remember?
Box, are you?
No, they would, a golem.
A golem.
Yeah, so like a golem, he had to do your bidding.
Kind of. Yeah, it's like slave labor essentially
Yeah.
for the afterlife.
Oh, but it's an inanimate object
I'm
without any feelings.
I believe so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a robot.
A droid.
He's a Roomba.
A droid. A Roomba for the fields.
Yeah.
Yeah. So really it was all about giving them all these tools in the mummification process for what they think would help them
Oh my gosh.
in the afterlife.
I just love their culture so much and all of these ideas and
so much beautiful artwork, these pyramids themselves, like we didn't even talk about the pyramids or the tombs. I think that's for a later episode. I'd love to talk about secret crypts and tombs.
Yeah, especially since they're uncovering so much today now, more so than they ever have because of the technology we have.
Right. There's so many amazing pharaohs, so many amazing queens,
right.
Cleopatra, Nefertiti, like ancient Egypt is such a big topic.
Yeah, so huge.
So huge.
Like, we just barely dipped our toe in.
Right. And of course we got to the magic first.
Right, of course, magic. I just, I'm still stuck on the Ka, the Ba, and the Shoot, and the Ankh, because it's like, I could just think, I was like, so the Ba is just another explanation for ghosts that are kind of stuck here on Earth.
Oh.
I'm just like, so if they can believe that they exist, why can't everybody in today's society believe that they exist?
Right. Yeah, there's not this
It's just
openness
energy. Yeah.
to the afterlife, but everyone there was just always prepping for it and respecting it and working with it.
We've sort of lost that, I feel like. We don't pay enough respect to the dead anymore like we used to.
I was wondering what would the Egyptians think of like cremation? Would that not prepare the body for afterlife?
I don't think that they would believe in cremation.
Right, because there's so many little things. Like another funny fact is like they would do for maybe a pharaoh, they would actually like put like a little rod basically in his penis so that it could be erect.
Yeah.
And that way in the afterlife he could still enjoy sex.
Right.
Like they had to do so many little things. So
although, what god was I talking about that she was the goddess of cremation almost? There was a goddess that I was talking about.
Oh, cremation. So they do talk about it.
Yeah, so they do talk about it. So maybe they do believe in that. But maybe those people don't live on in the same way. You wouldn't take on the same form. That's what I would think.
Right. It's interesting.
We could really do a whole episode on reincarnation and cremation and that kind of stuff.
And we've
Like
been
death,
talking
burial.
about reincarnation for a while. Like I think it's coming in episode
Yeah.
2020. Reincarnation.
Yeah, absolutely. Just interesting. I think that Egyptians today would look at our death process and be like, okay, well, they took so much time with the bodies and so much time mourning them. And we don't really do that as much as we, now it's boom, boom, boom. You got to get this done. You got to take care of the body right now. The family is not involved in the preparation of the cremation or the burial as much as it used to be.
Yeah, I could see that. And mummification sounds like it was a very religious experience. I don't know what I think about this, but there was one documentary where some scholars are putting their thoughts on this. Of course, they're just assuming.
Right.
And I don't agree with this assumption. They assumed that people were afraid of necrophilia. Is that the right word? And that they were afraid that, like, by turning their wives in too early, that something like that would happen. And so, like, because they're all inferring this because some people would hold on to the body in their home until the last possible minute. And they're like, well, it's probably because they were afraid of necrophilia. And I'm like, why would you just jump to that conclusion?
Right.
I don't think that was what was going on.
No.
At all.
I don't think so.
Right.
I think that there was
Respect.
a respect and a ritual. They probably did spells with the body there. And there's that saying that the spirit lives attached to the body for 3 days around the body. So maybe for several of those days they were actually speaking with part of them, whether it was the ba or the
Maybe
ka.
they were doing their magic.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so since they believed that there were all these entities and they were coexisting, so they didn't believe that they had truly passed on.
There was
Their
still time.
physical body was just dead.
Yeah. A really, really, really rich time period in
For sure.
the world history.
Not to mention all that spectacular art and clothing and jewelry and...
Right. And the fact that they would, going back to the bathroom thing, I think that was so incredible that, like, grooming was a big deal. Having the eye makeup. Men were wearing these, like, wigs and the fake beards. And...
They even had tattooed eyeliner sometimes.
Oh, they did tattoo?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some of the girls had the tattooed eyeliner.
Right. So they were just really culturally, I think, aware, spiritually open. A lot to learn, I think, from Egyptians.
A lot of beauty.
Yeah. And so, like, when I go, like, with the more historical side of thinking about Egypt, I think, you know what, they did build the pyramids by themselves. Like, it's a disservice to say the aliens did it. But
right.
I don't know. Maybe they did have help from aliens. I don't...
Maybe. I think there's a possibility. Hopefully we'll get to talk about that at another time. But I think that when we think about the pyramids, I think in today's terms, it's hard because the Egyptians lived for such a long period of time. Longer than most people even realize. And so, yes, the pyramids were built in a time when there may have been Egyptians there, but they're finding that some of those pyramids may have predated the Egyptians.
Okay. I wonder if magic was involved or if their gods were involved.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Interesting because they do say, here we go. I'm like, oh, we're going to talk about this later, but the pyramids are all laid up, aligned to certain
stars.
Yeah, stars and constellations.
Yeah. Which is really, really, really crazy because it's also like the pyramids could be aligned with other monuments in other countries even.
Right. And ley lines and all
Yeah.
of that taken into account.
Yeah. So, I mean, we believe in magic. We
Yes.
practice magic. We do spells. So let's think about a society where everyone is doing spell work every single day
Without persecution.
without persecution. How crazy amount of powerful vibrations, how much energy is in
Yeah.
that city. I don't know if people were cursing each other back then in the day. There might have been spells against one another or trying
Right.
to control one another, but I think for the most part it was all pretty positive.
Right.
So
Just imagining
Wow.
the drum circle that you would have. I'm just like, oh, so much energy.
just have some Blue Lotus and start drumming.
And Ra is here. You wouldn't even believe it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just think the whole collective energy of that place must have been insane.
Right. Pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And we didn't even touch on even half the gods. There were so many lower level gods. I just picked a few.
No, I really appreciate you doing that research because I was overwhelmed by the idea of it. Because there are so many gods.
I couldn't stop. Like, I was like, oh, I want to talk about this one and this one and this one and this one.
Yeah.
And then I was like, shoot, I've got to stop sometime.
Right. I mean, I think that Egypt is, like you said, it's a huge topic. We'll go back
Yeah.
for more.
Yeah, we'll get more gods and goddesses and more into the alien aspect.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that if you think of the gods as aliens,
Like the Anunnaki.
yeah, or even Ra, I mean, he came from the sky,
True.
so just aliens, just a word that we use.
Yeah. So, when you're telling the stories of these gods, are these just kind of like Greek gods where they just have these legends and mythology? Or did they look at them like historical people?
They looked at them like historical people.
I wonder if
That
there's evidence to them.
that the god name was something. So like with Ra, his god name was Ra, but when he took human form, his name was Adam.
Okay.
When
So there could be historical evidence of these people actually living?
right. So when Hathor or Hathor, that was her human form, but when she was in her god form, she was Sekhmet.
So it's kind of like Odin, how Odin probably was a real guy.
Right.
And he kind of just became...
I feel that's how most gods and goddesses, that they were gods first, then took human form, and then became gods again
Wow.
in their death.
It's very intense.
Yeah, that's just my personal belief. I don't know if that's how it really works because I've never...
I always just imagine they're just myths, but then I think about it, and then you learn about it, and you find the history.
The more and more that I feel like we delve into gods and goddesses, the more and more I think that there's some truth and basis
Yeah.
into all of the stories.
Right. And even recently we've been talking about how I think it's important that we recognize that there are many gods.
Yes.
And that we respect one another for worshiping said gods.
Absolutely.
And that's what's so great about Egypt is that they were doing that. They were working with all of these gods.
Right.
And there was no persecution.
Yeah, none. You could believe it. We weren't going to murder you if you didn't believe it.
Right.
Because everybody's entitled to their own belief.
Yeah.
Love it. Man, I love magic.
I know! And Egypt.
Yeah, and Egypt.
Awesome. So,
This is good.
should we wrap it up?
Yeah, let's wrap it up.
Okay. Yay. I'll go.
Maybe we'll wrap it up. We're just still talking.
I know, we can go on and on. Thank you guys for listening, and I hope you guys join us next Wednesday for our Yule episode. In the meantime, you can go find us over on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and that is at Cousins Coven. You can check out our blog at cousinscoven.home.blog, where you can find witchy words of wisdom, spells, and all of our archived episodes from season 1. And send in any research ideas that you'd like us to cover, or if you have questions, any just emails, tell us about your personal paranormal experiences, send those to cousinscoven2@gmail.com. We love hearing from you guys, so please like, subscribe, and share with all of your witchy and weirdo friends.
And may you find happiness in your heart, love for yourself, and joy in each other. Blessings to all.